don't you go with me into God's Word while we get this message kicked off? Go to the Gospel of John. I'll let you turn there. We'll go to chapter 16. I'm excited tonight for this message because it's our third week in a 6-part series where we are focusing on things Jesus never said. You may be wondering, why in the world would a church talk about things that Jesus never said? The reason why is because people have a tendency to put words into Jesus' mouth. So what I want to do is start with the things that Jesus didn't say in order to grasp the power of what Jesus did say. Last weekend, I talked to you about what Jesus didn't say about happiness. Tonight, I want to talk to you about what Jesus never said about bad days. Jesus never said that you will always be healthy. Jesus never said that you won't drop your cell phone and your screen won't crack. Jesus never said that your parents will never yell at you. Jesus never said that your friends will never leave you out. Jesus never said that the one will show up on your doorstep and ask you to marry them. Jesus never said you won't have bad days. Jesus never said that. So let's go to the Gospel of John, chapter 16, and let's take a look at what Jesus did say. The book of John in the Bible is one of the Gospels. That's 4 books of the Bible that tell the story of Jesus. They get the privilege, the only 4 in the Bible who get the privilege of telling the story of Jesus. There's 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so we go to the book of John to hear the story of Jesus. And in this chapter, it's toward the end of Jesus' journey on earth. If you know Jesus' story, you know he came as a baby to the mom of Mary. That was his mother, and he comes to this world, and we don't know much about his life until he becomes an adult. And he invites disciples to follow him, and they follow him for around 2 to 3 years. Well, he's at the end of those 2 or 3 years, and he's telling his disciples what's going to happen next. That's what he's explaining to them in this chapter, starting with verse 16. Jesus says to his disciples, "A little while, and you will no longer see me. And again a little while, and you will see me." Sounds like hide and go seek. He says, "Then some of his disciples said to one another, 'What does he mean saying to us, a little while, and you will no longer see me, and again in a little while, and you will see me?'" Can you picture what's happening here? Like, it normally doesn't happen with adults when I'm preaching. Most of the time, adults are at least looking at me, or your face is toward me and your eyes are closed. But most of the time, when I'm speaking to adults, I don't have a problem that sometimes you have when you're speaking to teenagers. When you're speaking to teenagers, they act like it's the worst thing in the world that they have to be in the room. And so when they get bored quick, they go straight to their cell phone, and they're looking on their cell phone. And then as you're speaking to them, they look at each other and they share their cell phone thing that they're looking at together, and then they start to giggle a little bit. And as a speaker, you're in your mind, you're saying things, and you have things that you prepared, while at the same time having a conversation. I need to say something to these teens. Like, what are they doing right now? It's the strangest thing. And so what's happening in this scene right now is Jesus is talking to them, and it's kind of like teenagers having a side conversation, and they think Jesus can't see them doing this. And so what I like is that Jesus calls them out. Jesus steps forward. So let me read it some more. It says that some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean saying to us, a little while, and you will no longer see me, and again a little while, and you will see me? And because I am going to the Father." Now, you notice he didn't say that the first time. He added that in this time. In verse 18, it says, they said, "What does he mean by this, a little while?" We don't know what he's talking about. I'm sure there's been moments in your life when you have heard a message that someone has delivered. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was another pastor. Maybe it was just someone you're talking to, and you said to yourself, "What in the world are they talking about? What in the world?" They have no clue what Jesus is saying. In verse 19, it says, Jesus knew that they wanted to ask him. So he said to them, Are you discussing among yourselves what I meant when I said, a little while, and you will no longer see me, and again a little while, and you will see me? And then Jesus says this, very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. He didn't really answer their question, did he? But he did answer their question. He says, very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. You will have pain, but your pain will turn into joy. Now, we can say what Jesus is talking about because we're on this side of Jesus' story. Like, we're not in the moment with them where they're trying to figure this out. They don't have a clue what he's saying. We know that Jesus went to the cross. We know that's the direction where he is headed. We know that's where he's walking. He's headed toward Jerusalem to go to that place where they are going to stand him in front of everyone and accuse him of things that he didn't do so they can get that approval by the government to say, put him on a cross and crucify him with all the other criminals. We know he's going in that direction, but they don't. And so what he's trying to explain to them is, I'm going to leave you, but I'm going to come back. And when I leave you, it's going to cause you a moment where you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice because they will think they have conquered me. He says in verse 21, when a woman is in labor, she has pain because her hour has come. But when her child is born, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy of having brought a human being into the world. So you have pain now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one, let me say it, no one will take away your joy. No one. No one will take away your joy. You know, I believe that most people who try church, I believe they want to believe in God. I think people who come to church, that's what they want. I don't think you would come to church if you didn't at least want to believe in God. The problem is when bad things happen, you get pulled into this thought, well, if these things are happening, then where's God? Like if these bad things are happening, where is God? You think to yourself, I'm actually attempting this Jesus stuff. However, nothing is changing in my life. Everything's the same. In fact, some things have become worse in my life since I've attempted this Jesus stuff, which is causing me to assume that maybe this doesn't work. And guess what? Some of us in the room right now are at this place in our belief in God. Some of you right now, you are facing dark financial times. Some of you in the room right now, you are facing serious health problems. For some of you, it's something relational. For some of you, it's something emotional. For some of you, it's work. For some of you, it's school. It doesn't really matter what it is. Whatever it is, it's causing you to be afraid, and it's causing you to hurt, and it's making you feel overwhelmed, thinking that nobody understands. You're thinking nobody understands that I am actually trying this Jesus stuff. I am attempting to follow Jesus, but the only thing that consistently seems to be happening in my life is that I am hitting a wall. Anybody with me? You don't have to admit that tonight. I am hitting a wall. I am trying this church thing. I am trying to follow Jesus, but the only thing that seems to be happening is that I am hitting a wall. If this is you, you may want to hear what I'm about to say next. Because Jesus never said, you will always rejoice and you will never have bad days. It's not what Jesus said. In fact, in the context of Jesus telling his disciples some bad news, in the context of telling his disciples, I'm about to leave you, in the context of telling them that he's about to give up his life, this is what Jesus did say in the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verse 20. He says, very truly, I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. Now, I take that as Jesus saying that I don't promise you a pain-free life. Like Jesus doesn't say to us that you won't experience trials and troubles. Because if you look at verse 20, it says some things that are very specific, geared toward this idea of what happens when bad things come into our life. Because what Jesus says is you will have this time of grief, but your grief someday will turn to joy. Now, those of you in the room who had braces growing up, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure whenever you found out from the dentist and they came to you and they said, you know, you need braces, I'm pretty sure they didn't promise it would be pain-free. I'm willing to bet that no dentist, when they bring you that news, says to you, you don't have to worry about it, it'll be pain-free. I wish the dentist was pain-free. I wish that I hate going to the dentist. It is terrible. I can't even get cold water on my teeth and it hurts. They take cold water and they blast it on your teeth. They take this tool now that they used to just use with their hand and now it's a power tool. Have you been to the dentist recently? It's a power tool. This thing they do to scrape your teeth, it's a power tool now. It's not just a scraper. It has some serious electricity behind it. And they scrape your teeth and they tell you every time that it hurts to let them know. Nobody in the room wants to let the dentist know that it hurts because we don't want to be that person. Anybody? I don't want to be that person. And so you just wince. It hurts. And then you get up and your shirt's all bloody. We actually just went to the dentist recently. No cavities here, everyone. No cavities. Brooklyn cannot say the same, which means she ain't brushing her teeth when she needs to brush her teeth. That's bad. That's bad. That's real bad. But I know when you go to the dentist and they say that you're going to get braces, that you know there's going to be pain involved. And the day you get those braces off and your teeth went from candy corn to your teeth looking like everybody else's in your mouth, you are rejoicing. You're saying the pain was worth it. The pain was worth it. And Jesus is saying you're going to have bad days. And there's going to be some pain. But hold on because there's going to be some joy coming right after it. Jesus goes on to say in verse 22 that now may be your time of grief, but I will see you again and you will rejoice. And then I love the phrase of what he says next. And no one, nobody, no person, no man, no woman, no government, no boss, no teacher, nobody is going to steal your joy. And then he says something in verse 33 that is extremely important to understand because Jesus says this. He says, I've told you these things so that in me, Jesus says, in my presence, you will find peace. Jesus says there are going to be bad days, but your pain will turn into joy when you continue to walk with me. If you are someone here tonight who wants to believe that God is real, then you may need to change how you see bad days. Because Jesus doesn't promise that you won't have problems in your life. Jesus promises that you will find peace in the midst of the pain. The challenge for all of us in this room is that sometimes we need to change how we see bad days and have a new perspective on it. We need to see it from a new point of view. And the first way that you can change your point of view is to see that troubles and hardship, they prove your faith. Troubles and hardship show the depth of your trust in God. As a college student, I couldn't believe, I was shocked. I was shocked what I learned in church history about the persecutions that happened in the years between 60 and 65 AD. I don't know if any of you know this period of time in church history. I didn't know before I went to college. I didn't read books growing up, and nobody told me in church about church history. I found it out when I got to college. I was actually talking to my kids. They have read so many books. by the time they've reached 7th grade, I don't ever remember checking a book out in my entire elementary, middle school, or high school career. The library was the last place I wanted to go. If you walked in it, it looked like you shouldn't take the books off the shelf because they should remain there as decoration. In my mind, books weren't something I read. And I get to college and I'm learning things I never knew. One of the worst persecutions in the history of the world against people who were followers of Jesus. Nero was ruthless. And he made sure that in his presence and his kingdom, that anybody who was a follower of Jesus, he was going to wipe you out, to the point that if he found out you were a follower of Jesus, in the moment, he could have your head. I mean, he was taking Christians out left and right. So if you were somebody who remained a follower of Jesus during this time, it proved something about you. It said something about your belief in God. And I try to think about that today, and we don't even know in America, man. I mean, the worst kind of persecution I've ever had as a Christian is feeling judged by going to see you at the pool at school. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever heard of this? They have this thing called see you at the pole. And it's a thing that they do before school. And I grew up in high school, and I was a believer since I can remember. I was talking to Bruno about this. Some people have stories of when they came to faith. And there was a moment when I prayed when I was young, but I don't ever remember not being a follower of Jesus. Never. I don't remember. It doesn't make me perfect. I just don't have that story. And so I grew up in church. It was my second home. If there was a service on Sunday morning, we went. If there was a service on Sunday night, we went. If there was a revival, we went every single night. And if there was youth group on Wednesday, if there was Sunday school, if there was church doors open, we were in the church doors. We were in the church doors. And the worst thing that ever happened to me in persecution was feeling bad about going to school and praying at the flagpole before school started. That's the worst persecution I could think of. Like, I hated the fact that I had to go stand around the flagpole with all my friends that were also believers, while my other friends who didn't go to church might walk by and think, what in the world are they doing? Why are they standing around the flagpole praying? Now, I think it's a decent concept, but I just didn't feel like, I just felt like I'd be judged by it. The next worst persecution I can think of as a believer in America is wearing a Christian t-shirt and being made fun of for wearing a Christian t-shirt. I've said this to you before. My parents loved to buy me those shirts that shouldn't even be printed. We have printers in the house. Don't print some of these shirts anymore. Don't let anybody do them, because they buy them for their kids and they make them wear them in public, and you're embarrassed to wear them because it's like I don't know. That was the worst for me. But can you imagine your life being threatened for what you believe? That's the context out of which Peter writes some words in the Bible. Peter is a follower of Jesus living during this time of persecution. And out of this context, Peter writes these words. He says, be truly glad while everybody's being persecuted. Be truly glad, because there is a wonderful joy ahead. That's not the time when you want to hear there's a wonderful joy ahead. When somebody in your family has lost theirs. He said there's a wonderful joy ahead. There's a wonderful joy that's coming down the road, even though for the moment you may have to endure some serious hard times. And then he says something that I think really should grip us, because the next thing that he says is that these trials that we're going through right now, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. They will show that your faith is genuine. I don't know if you know this or not, but during this period of history when they were persecuting Christians, it wasn't easy to become a Christian. Christians weren't going out and inviting you to come to a church service like this where we have music and lights and we can wear our hats and it's okay and you can wear jeans and come as you are. Like they weren't going out and trying to find people like that. They were nervous. They were nervous because if somebody found out you were a Christian, then they could tell Nero, and Nero could send out his army and they could get you and they could take your life. So everybody who was a Christian in secret. They were very cautious who they told anybody that they were a follower of Jesus, but somehow the word would spread and they would become very concerned, okay, can we trust this person? So in order to become a follower of Jesus at this point in history, you had to be like somebody who waited an entire year before you were included in really being a part of the church. And that's the time in church history, I would say baptism was the most significant part of the church it has ever been. Even though Jesus did it, and that's an important part of our Bible, I think at this moment in history, this was the most meaningful time in history when baptism meant something. Because after you were a follower of these people who said they were followers of Jesus for an entire year, and they kind of brought you into the fold of the family of God, at the end of that year, if you were still a faithful follower, and you hadn't turned anybody else in, then they would take you to a secret place somewhere down in the caves, and they would baptize you there with all the other people who were secretly followers of Jesus because you had made it for an entire year. I would love for baptism to be like that, that we would really have something to celebrate, that you made it an entire year being brought into this family, and now we're going to do it through this ceremony that says, wow, you have been washed clean. And that's the context out of which Peter says, be truly glad. Because when you endure those trials, it proves that your faith is genuine. He's saying in those moments, it's in those times, during those bad days, that your faith is proven real. It's in those days, in those bad times, when God takes those roots of your faith and plants them deep into the ground so that even though the sun is bursting hot and the wind is blowing strong, you will remain firm in your faith because your faith is real. Now, there's a lot of people in the world that I know who say that they can surf. If you go to the beach, there's a lot of people who carry surfboards down the beach. I'm a surfer, and they take it down the beach. But there's one way you can tell if somebody truly knows how to surf, and that's when they get into the water. There's a lot of people who bring surfboards to the beach. There's not a lot of people who take those surfboards down and put them into the water. There's another test how you can tell if somebody's a surfer or not. Watch them as they get onto their board in the water and how far they make it out into the ocean. Because if they can truly surf, then they can make it past all the inside break. Let me explain that. All the whitewater waves that are crashing, you have to get past those out to where the waves are breaking a little bigger. So if you're watching someone, you'll know they can surf if they can make it past all that mess in the front of the waves. And then you can watch them for a little while, because as the big waves come and you see them about to catch the wave, if there's somebody who just keeps backing out, then you probably know they're not that great of a surfer. And then most likely, if they're out there for 5 minutes and they come back in and tell everybody how great it was, they are not somebody who can surf. How you know you're a surfer, or somebody who knows how to surf, is you will stay out in those conditions and put yourself in a position where you can get hurt. That's somebody who likes to surf. That's somebody who knows how to surf. I'm not saying I'm a surfer. I mean, I've been hurt before on the surfboard. But it's just interesting to me how when you're out there in the water, you prove something by how long you're willing to stay. One time I went surfing with a group of people, and it was people that we had just been getting to know, and the one family had brought surfboards, and the dad was like, yeah, man, I love to surf. We're like, all right, let's go out, man. Let's go out and surf. Let's catch these waves. They weren't big, but to all of you who don't surf, every wave looks big. It's amazing. Like, we'll go to the beach and we'll surf, and then you all are like, how big were the waves? And we'll tell you, like, those are huge, man. Those are huge. And we're out in the same waves as you. And like, did you catch a bunch of waves? We're like, no, they were too small to catch. But we were this day, the waves weren't huge, but we had the boards, they were big enough to ride. And so we all get our surfboards, we take them out into the water, and we start to paddle out. There were 4 of us. By the time we made it out, there were 3 of us. And we looked back and we're like, where is, he was already done. Which proved to us that he didn't know how to surf. You have to go through the hard times in order for your faith to be proven. The second way that you can change how you see bad days, how you can see bad days from a new perspective, is to see this, is to see that troubles and trials prepare you for purpose. Because comfort and ease never make you stronger. It's resistance that strengthens us. Resistance. Resistance is the thing that strengthens us. I learned this idea when I was in middle school running cross country. It's something my dad always taught me. My dad was somebody who was tough. My dad is somebody who, if you told him he couldn't do something, he would prove to you he could do it. He was the guy who, when West Point was calling me and saying, hey, come play basketball for us, and I was saying, there ain't no chance. I am going to a military school. My dad is saying, go to the military school. It's going to be a great career. I'm like, no way am I going to a military school. My dad is tough. By the way, you can pray for my dad. He was in the hospital all week this week. He lost his memory on Monday night. He just sat up out of bed and said, do I have a job? And my mom would tell him his job, and then he would say, do I have a job? And they took him to the hospital, and he had tests all week, and they can't figure it out. They don't know what's going on. So you can be praying for my dad. So my dad, who's a tough guy, a guy who I always looked up to and taught me how I thought to be tough. It was interesting having a conversation with him this week, as I'm hearing his voice kind of shift from, I don't have to be tough anymore. I don't have to be that guy who always runs and runs and runs. But something my dad taught me in running is when you do run, it should hurt. It's something that I learned in middle school because I would run with my dad when I was a little boy, and he would take it easy on me. But then you get into a competitive situation if you're someone like me and you want to win. I didn't run a race to lose. I ran a race to win. And as a 7th grader, you're running against 8th graders. I didn't care if they were in 8th grade. My dad taught me, you go hard. But when you go hard in the 7th grade, trying to keep up with 8th graders, it burns in your chest. Anybody ever know that feeling? You ever tried to go for a run and it burns in your chest? Do you know what happens to most people when they get to that place where it starts to burn in their chest? What do? We stop and we walk. That's what we do. That burn that happens, when you get those cramps in your side. Like I remember running with my dad sometimes as a little boy, and I'd be getting those cramps, and my dad's like, just breathe through it, son. And now I'm telling my daughter the same thing, except for the son part. I'm saying you got to push through this. Like you have to. My cross-country coach said something to me I didn't know. He said, when you are becoming a runner who wants to get faster and be able to run longer, your lungs have to expand and get bigger. And he said, in those moments when it hurts the worst, that's when you're expanding your lungs the most. So if you want to run faster and longer, you have to run through the pain. Nobody wants to hear that. I helped coach my daughter's cross-country team. I tried to tell them to run through the pain. They would sprint and they would stop and they would walk, some of them. It made no sense to me. I'm trying to tell them this is a 2-mile race. This is not a 200-meter race. You can't just sprint and stop. When you feel the pain, you keep going because eventually that pain will reside and you will be stronger than you were before. You have to push through that pain. When that stuff begins to hurt, you have to say, I'm not going to give up because it's the pain that makes us strong. It's that resistance that gives us strength. The trials and the troubles aren't just something that happens to us. It's something that makes possible what God wants to do in us. In the book of James, it says in chapter 1, it says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of any kind, because you know that the testing of your faith does something inside of us. What it does inside of us is it develops perseverance. And so the book of James chapter 1 says, let perseverance finish its work in you. Let it make you complete. Let it make you mature, somebody who is lacking in nothing. Which means you don't have to just focus on the pain. You can see the potential for preparation in the troubles and the trials. Because in those times, God is able to strengthen you. Like you are someone who can change how you see bad days. You are someone who can change things that happen to you in your life, such as rejection. You can change your focus on feelings and opportunities and experiences with rejection, rather than focusing on being turned down. You can shift your focus to think about how you can use this to be raised up. Because God never wastes a bad day. God never wastes a bad day. Never. God doesn't create them and God doesn't cause them, but God definitely never wants to waste them. God is somebody who from any breakdown is able to build you up stronger, because it's in those troubles and those trials that God plants you deep so that you can withstand any dry season. Any dry season. Following Jesus isn't about having life the way you want it in this world, because the world is temporary. It's passing. It's fading away. Which is why Jesus says these words. Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome. I have overcome. I have conquered the grave. Sin no longer has a hold on you. I am the one who has taken everything that can cause problems in your life, and even though it feels bad, I can make it something that becomes good. I have overcome. Jesus never said, listen to this, Jesus never said your parents won't take your cell phone away from you. Jesus never said that your boss won't treat you unfairly. Jesus never said your teacher won't give you a bad grade. Jesus never said that your professor won't give you hours and hours of reading this semester. Jesus never said that the people that you're married to will always treat you the way that you want to be treated. Jesus never said that your parents will never hurt you. Jesus never said that your church will never do something that causes you to feel pain. Jesus never said there won't be bad days. But what Jesus did say is that even though there's going to be bad days, in me, not in this world, in me, you will find peace. You will find peace. You will find peace. I think that's what we're all looking for. Will you stand with me? Bad days. And my dad had a bad day this week. 5 bad days. I'm not sure it has become good for him yet. When they sent him home, they said, I guess you'll come back in a month and we'll try to figure it out after we monitor your heart. That feels like bad days. That feels like bad days. I don't know what your bad day feels like. Some days, for me, a bad day is waking up and wondering, well, where are we going to be next year as a church? Some days, for me, a bad day is somebody telling me that they're not coming back to this church. Some days, for me, a bad day is when I wake up and I realize that I have done something wrong to hurt someone in my family. That feels like a bad day. What feels like a bad day to me is when I sometimes think about the fact that I haven't talked to my own brother in over 2 years. That feels like a bad day. That feels like a bad day for me. Sometimes it feels like a bad day when I think about all the things that I've missed out on in my life because I've made certain choices to live here or to do that. Sometimes I think back on those bad days when I had a leader who didn't treat me right, or a coach who overlooked me, or a teacher who didn't give me every ounce of effort they had to make me the best that I could be. I think of all the bad days I've had in my life, and every day I look at the same thing that's consistent throughout all of them is that God has always been with me. God has always been with me through the storms, on the mountaintops, in the valleys, through the wilderness. God has always been with me. And when my heart has grown faint, when my heart has been weak, God was always with me, giving me strength. There was a time in my life where, as somebody who grew up with a dad who taught me to always be strong, I feel like a strong person most of the time in my life. But there was that season when I was in college and basketball, and I'd spent my entire childhood trying to become this basketball player that I wanted to become. And then all of a sudden, it was cut off in my life, completely cut off. I became someone who my entire town looked to as, wow, Coy is going to be in the NBA someday. They didn't know the truth. I'm not tall enough, I'm not fast enough, I can't jump high enough, but they all thought this, and my identity was wrapped up in, I am this basketball player. And then in one decision, a coach sits with me and says, you're no longer gonna play on this team next year. I left college with 1 year of eligibility on my basketball resume. I can barely sometimes go back to my hometown because I don't want to run into somebody who will ask me, Coy, what happened to you in college? Like, it's so hard for me some days. And there was a season in my life where I think I forgot who I was. And it was painful. It was painful. I remember having conversations with Brooklyn, and she would just, it's like, where are you, Coy? But I know God was always with me. And now I look at that time in my life, and though I would not want to ever go through that again, I believe God has used that to shape who I am today, to be someone who can withstand the troubles and the trials that come upon me now, who can be a pastor that can stand here and say, you know what, we are never going to give up as a church, Somos. We are not going to give up. It doesn't matter if someone else shuts the door, God will open another one. And so I don't know what's happening in your life. I don't know if you're depressed. I don't know if you're sad. I don't know if you're in pain. I don't know if you have troubles. I don't know. Chances are a lot of you do. And the word that God wants to say to you is, don't expect God to prevent those bad days. Just cry out for God to give you peace in the midst of them. That's what I'm going to pray for you all right now. Some of you need peace. Let's pray. God, only you can help us work through the pain and the troubles and the trials and get us to a place where we find joy. I don't know anybody else in this world who has tried to live according to the patterns that say whatever I want is the best thing for me, because all I see is a lot of pain and a lot more problems and people struggling emotionally, and they think they have all that they want, but they have nothing. God, there's people in the room right now who are going through bad days. They've been going through bad days for several days in a row. And they wake up every morning and they say to themselves, this can't be why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? God, where are you? I want to believe you're real, but these bad things are happening. So I have to assume that if I believe in you and nothing is changing, then it must mean that you're not real and this thing doesn't work. So why am I even coming to church? Why am I opening my Bible to pray? Why am I reading your scripture? Why am I doing any of these things? Going to a Bible? Why am I doing this? God, I might as well just give up. But God, change the way we see our bad days to let us know that no matter whether we believe you're real, we are going to have bad days. We are going to have bad days because the enemy is out to take away our life from us and destroy us and to make us people who can't live in the joy that you want to bring into our lives. And even though in those moments it may feel like you have left us, you haven't, God. Remind us who you are, that you have conquered sin and death, that you have gone to the grave so that you could come back to us. For a little while you were gone, but you have come back to us, and we can rejoice knowing that someday in our future, we won't have bad days anymore. But God, the only way we will get to that destination is to find peace in the pain today. So God, give us peace. Give us peace in those relationships that were broken. Give us peace in those jobs where we feel like we want to quit. Give us peace at our schools when we're struggling to get along with our teachers and our classmates. God, just give us peace when the bad things happen. In your name we pray. Amen.